is a beautiful day here in Happy Valley. Game day forecast here is brought to you by Center Care. In need of rehab after hospitalization or injury, or you have a choice in your rehab provider, set and meet your therapy goals with the Center Care Rehabilitation Team. Call 814-278-6000. Online, centercare.org. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. It is 83 degrees. We're going to have a beautiful, clear night, 60 degrees. That is your forecast for today. It is so nice. Aeneas thinks it's a little hot.
Just a little bit.
But it is a beautiful, sunshiny day. No clouds in the forecast. Beautiful breeze right here. And that's where we start. Normally, in this situation, an overly stuffed windbag like myself will set the scene for you with eloquent monologue about the upcoming game, trying to get a greater meaning about what's going to happen. And then, of course, zoom out to the season. This is the thing. You are a Penn State football fan. You understand the stakes for the 2023 season. You understand about this year and this opportunity for the Nittany Lions to ascend into another level of college football power. We're here to talk about the first game for the next 90 minutes. Myself and former Penn State defensive tackle Aeneas Hawkins are going to go through this game and explain how Penn State and West Virginia match up on the field, including some off-season storylines and some off-the-field storylines. So, Aeneas, welcome to the show. So excited to have you and your expertise here on the channel.
Excited to be here, man. I was just saying off the air, being back in State College, seeing this environment, the fans accumulating back in front of Beaver Stadium, getting ready to cheer their team on. It's exciting. And like you said, the expectations have never been higher. Certainly looking forward to seeing what Penn State football is able to accomplish in 2023.
Yeah, it's going to be a very exciting day to talk about a lot of different storylines. One thing that I want to start off, though, just a surface overlook. Let's get right into the meat. This game, Penn State, West Virginia. What do you think? How do you think Penn State, the Nittany Lions, match up with West Virginia, and how the two teams can, an overview of what's going to happen on the field tonight?
Yeah, well, I think on the surface there are two football programs who in their own respective ways are historic. There's a bit of a rivalry there back in the day. Again, none of these players were alive for it, but they definitely feel the night game, primetime, Beaver Stadium, doesn't get much better. But I love the matchup, man. Penn State's roster is full of talent. A lot of young guys who have already taken important reps heading into a season now where they're the starters. They're the guys, and they got to be leaders on this football team. So definitely excited to see how it goes.
Some of the off-season storylines we're talking about here in the first starter at that particular position, going from one year to the next.
Yeah, well, certainly a big transition in the football world. Anytime you got to replace a starting quarterback, especially one like Sean Clifford, who was historically here for what felt like a decade. I think Drew Allar on the surface is no secret. He's as talented as anybody that has donned the blue and white. For him to be the starting quarterback for the last year. That opportunity is now here, and it's going to be interesting to see what he does with the opportunity.
Appreciate everybody watching on our Blue White Illustrated YouTube stream. We have a little bit of an audio situation. I am currently holding the cord that's allowing you to hear us. So just so you know, week one for everybody. So if there are some mistakes from a young quarterback on the football field, that might be something that we go through tonight as well. Another thing that we're going to get to that I think is just interesting off the bat, some of the changes for the coaching staff. A bit of an underrated thing that I want to get your thoughts on. Mike Yurcich going up to the booth from a coaching perspective. I know you're not a coach, you're a former football player, but what does that do, being on the field versus being in the booth? And did you ever have a coach that made that switch while you were at Penn State?
Yeah, while I was playing, we had both Coach Pry and Tim Banks, right? Pry was down on the field. Banks was more of the eyes in the sky. On the offensive side of the football, I really don't think it's close. You get your offensive coordinator up in the box. He's able to see more as far as alignments from the defense, what type of looks he's getting, as well as different ways they can take advantage of what the defense is running. So I think it's huge that he's upstairs. I also think it's a credit to Danny O'Brien, a young guy, able to be on the field and kind of facilitate it from down there to allow Yurcich to go up to the top.
From that perspective, do you see a whole lot changing for Mike Yurcich? Do you think we'll see a better play caller? Do you think we'll see any changes on that front in terms of maybe something else he can do that he maybe didn't have the insight to do the last couple of years when he was on the field?
Yeah, well, I think it's two-sided in the sense. When you're on the field, one advantage that you have is being able to interact with your guys face-to-face in the heat of the moment, and based off of that, you're able to call some plays that you're comfortable with that you know they want to run. The other side of it, though, the positive being up top, again, is being able to actually see what's going on that field. It can be tough on the sideline with all the chaos and just the angle that you're viewing from to really be able to see everything you need to make the best decisions. So I certainly expect to see a better Mike Yurcich this year up in the box.
What is the communication like between football players and coaches on the field in terms of, like, I know some of it might be like, hey, what did you see? But I imagine there's other parts of it where, is it an emotional aspect of, like, trying to read a guy and see, okay, we need to maybe give him a break on this drive, and how much, you mentioned Danny O'Brien and giving him credit for that, how much is he going to be a part of managing a young quarterback?
Yeah, well, it's tough as a player. I'll tell you, you start messing up, you throw an interception, let a touchdown up. The first emotion, obviously, you come back to the sideline, you're pissed off.
Yeah.
And your coach is also pissed off. So you got to kind of navigate those feelings initially. But then from there, the best teams, the best coaches, and the athletes who are the best are able to get through those emotions, and then from there get better and figure out what went wrong.
On the practice field, were you able to do that? What were you like? Were you beating yourself up, or were you like, okay, I know what I did, I need to fix it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I would beat myself up a little bit, but Coach Spence, my guy for 4 years, he would make sure to beat me up a little bit more on the way to the sideline. That's how you get better. Definitely miss those days.
So the last thing I want to get to here, and this also, I imagine, hits close to home for you as well. News this week of former, I guess now it is former Penn State offensive lineman Landon Tengwall medically retiring from the game. A really unfortunate situation as somebody who also dealt with injuries throughout his career. What is that like? What is that like for a player to, on the eve of a season, no longer be a football player?
Yeah, man. First of all, Tangwall was a great teammate. He was a guy who was obviously a highly touted football player. He was a better guy. He was a better friend. So, definitely feel sorry for him, rooting for him. But it's a tough transition. You spend your whole life building your identity around a football identity and practices and lifts and all those different things that come with it, and then all of a sudden it's stripped away from you. One thing that I'll say Tangwall has that he'll benefit from is being at Penn State University, being with the staff that truly cares about him, teammates who are his brothers, and then a community also who is going to be willing to have his back as he makes his transition.
It's happened a couple of times for Penn State football players. Obviously, fans know Journey Brown and his heart condition that came out before the 2020 season. So something that happens, injuries are a part of football, whether or not they happen to you in a medical exam or on the football field. So what can he do and what can he still provide? Because James Franklin mentioned this week he is going to be a part of the program. He's part of the Penn State family. That'll never change is what Coach Franklin said. So how can his team rally around him, and what can he do to then still be a part of the program and contribute? Because as we know, like, football isn't just the people on the field, right? It takes an entire army of analysts and eyeballs to become the best team that you possibly can. So where does he fit into that particular conversation?
Yeah, I think it's interesting with Tangwall, because his personality is so dynamic. He obviously has the football knowledge where he could go be a college football coach if he wanted to. I also see Landon Tangwall as the guy who could be the director of player development and help those guys continue to develop away from the field. That's something I think he could do at a high level. I think he'll do a little bit of everything. One part of transitioning from being a current athlete is that you don't necessarily know what direction you want to go. Coach Franklin and his staff will do a good job, as they did with me, as they did with Journey Brown when he retired, of getting him involved in a bunch of different areas to see what his interests are.
Did you think you'd be sitting here with me?
No, this wasn't on the bingo card, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, we appreciate you being here. We're going to be here for the next about 80 minutes, as my timer says. We've been talking for about 10 minutes on the Penn State Tailgate show. We're going to take a quick break and be back. We'll take a quick split here from the stream and the broadcast, and we'll be back with segment 2. We're going to break down and get some inside the trenches analysis from Aeneas on the other side, talking about the Penn State run game. That's next.
I get it. You didn't make it to today's game. You didn't plan ahead in time. Nobody's perfect. We totally get it. I'm T. Frank, and I'm here to help you with that for the rest of the season, though. Tixman Gym is your source for reliable tickets to Penn State home football games. Join the most exciting atmosphere in college football with Tixman Gym. primetime games, noon kickoffs, big opponents, whatever you have in mind, whatever game you want to go to, they've got tickets for you. If you've been looking for a source of Penn State football tickets, a reliable one, Tixman Jim at TixmanJim.com, formerly PSUTixman.com, has been running his ticket exchange in Wilmington, Delaware for over 25 years. Every buyer is handled with courtesy and respect, and every purchase is guaranteed. Most tickets transfer to your Ticketmaster email address. So get your tickets, 302-521-8380 or TixmanJim.com. That's 302-521-8380. Hey, it's T. Frank. I know kickoff is just hours away, but there is still time for you to get in on the best Penn State football content anywhere. And I mean that anywhere, because Blue White Illustrated has you covered at bluewhiteillustrated.com with feature articles, insider content, and premium message board access to the insider knowledge in recruiting and Penn State football, basketball, wrestling, and more. But it's not just that. BlueWhiteIllustrated.com on the YouTube channel. You know about that if you're watching the show today. Check us out there or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, Blue White Illustrated, the magazine that's been going for over 40 years. But right now, sign up for BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and get 50% off the year-long subscription. So millions of words, thousands of insights, thousands of articles that you get for $49.99. There's no better deal on the internet for you to get Penn State football coverage than to subscribe to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, your place for Penn State football news. Are you a company that is passionate about athletics and wants to tap into the Penn State sports community? Maybe you're a community organization in State College, Center County, Pennsylvania, or even planet Earth. Are you interested in growing your brand and leveraging our YouTube and podcast platform? Or are you just a person that has some money to spend? If you're any of those things, or something I didn't bring up just now, consider advertising on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube show. We have a dedicated and passionate audience that is just waiting to hear from you. Through me, talking about your business on the show. That's how we do it. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, email Michelle DeLee Hamilton at michelle@comanpub.com. That's michelle@comanpub.com. We're waiting to hear from you. Through me, talking about you. Again, that's how we do it.
We always take the deals the other guys want.
Now back to the Penn State Football Tailgate Show, driven by Blaze Alexander Family Dealership.
I am Aeneas Hawkins here today to give you what I believe to be the key matchup in this battle between West Virginia and Penn State. T. Frank, it's no secret, Penn State football has one of college football's absolute best running back duos in Nick Singleton and Katron Allen back for year 2. It is also no secret that Drew Allar is making his first career start in Beaver Stadium, primetime game against West Virginia. I bring those two things up to tell you the key matchup to me today in this game is Penn State's offensive line versus West Virginia's defensive line and their linebackers. I think it's going to be crucially important to keep Drew Allar upright to let him get as comfortable as possible early and often, and it's going to be super duper important to get that run game going to take some of that pressure off of Drew in his first game. We already highlighted it earlier with Landon Tangwall being forced to medically retire. Unfortunately, I expect to see J.B. Nelson fill his role at the left guard spot. He's a guy who hasn't played in a ton of football games, but the staff has been high on for a long time. The one thing I will say about West Virginia's front as a unit is that although they're undersized, they like to utilize a lot of movement, stunts, and different pressures to try to confuse an offensive line, especially in third down situations where Penn State has to drop back and throw the football to convert the sticks. With a new left guard in there, I expect to see West Virginia do that even more. I think it's super crucial for Penn State to develop not only a good run game, but a pass game, and to find some of that balance early on in the year is going to be crucial for their success down the road in the Big Ten.
The key matchups today brought to you by Stalker Chevrolet. Let's get into a little bit. I want to dig in more of that because I'm a huge football nerd. So J.B. Nelson stepping into the starting role in that position. How much can an individual make an effect on an offensive line? Because from my understanding, offensive lines are sometimes cumulative, where you have 5 guys that work together might be better than 1 star and 2 guys that struggle and 3 guys that are, somewhere in the middle. So how does this particular group look to you as in terms of kind of that tapestry of where are they on that scale?
Yeah, I think they have a lot of chemistry coming back. This is the most returning talent that offensive line group has had in a long time. You get a fifth-year Caden Wallace back. You got Sal Wormley. They played a lot of football next to each other. And the good news for J.B. Nelson is on his right, he's got Hunter Norzad, who proved last year he's a very high-quality interior O-lineman, and guess what? He's got the best offensive lineman in college football on his left. It is super important for those two guys to be able to work together, and Olu and J.B. Nelson on their double teams, to be able to get that run game going. It will be a little bit different for Olu. He'll have to adjust to having a new guard because they work together so much to move those three techniques that may be in front of him.
Hunter Norzad, let's get there for a second, because I think last year playing through injured in the Ohio game and then battled through it a couple, once Landon Tengwall went down in the middle of last season, he had to step into that left guard position. And do you think that we got a fair account of what he is as an offensive lineman? What do you expect? You said great offensive lineman there. What are you expecting from him in year two with Phil Troutwine and with Mike Yurcich and this particular offensive line?
Well, the first thing that jumps out is he's moving over to center. Drew Scruggs leaves for the NFL, second-round draft pick. He's got an opportunity now to go to a position that he's probably most comfortable at. You may not know, at Cornell, Hunter Norzad was a tackle. Yeah. And he moved to guard last year, and center is really where he's wanted to be the whole time. He's a smart kid, obviously went to Cornell. He's going to have to be the leader of that group and step up. Drew Scruggs is another guy. He's a quality leader that Penn State loses in 2023 that not enough people are talking about. So it's going to be important for Hunter to be the vocal leader of that group, especially down the clutch of the Big Ten schedule.
Something that I think has been really interesting watching Mike Yurcich and studying who he was when he was at Oklahoma State and studying kind of the systems and what he came from. There's been a huge evolution in kind of his play calling to being a little bit more balanced, and I think Neil Brown called them multiple, as an offense in general, but going even a little bit deeper into the run game. What does that do for a defensive lineman when you have to contend for, and for football fans that don't know, maybe inside zone, outside zone, counter, man, power? These are all different run schemes that Penn State has run over the years. So as a defensive tackle, how do you deal with that when you don't maybe know that it's a particular system that you can kind of prepare for?
It's frustrating. Paralysis by analysis is a thing. As a D tackle, as a big 300-pound guy just firing off the ball, that's all you want to worry about is firing off the ball.
Yeah.
When you have things like counters, outside zones, different run schemes that you will pull out whenever you feel like, it makes you slow down, get your steps right, and try to stay in your gaps. And that is something that we can see Penn State try to utilize against the D-lines of Michigans and Ohio States down the line. Giving them a lot to deal with slows down what they're able to do penetration-wise from the start of the snap.
But you weren't one of those 300-pound guys. You were fast.
Yeah, a long time ago I was fast. been a while.
So shifting our focus from the Penn State offensive line and kind of the promise that I think Penn State fans even right now have for this running game and Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, looking over at the West Virginia side of the ball, that defensive line, no Stills there anymore, number 55 in the center for them last year, a huge part of that. What do you see from their defensive line and their defense in general? What are they bringing into Beaver Stadium tonight?
The biggest advantage that I think West Virginia's defense may find themselves having tonight is that their defense is so unique. And you remember from when we watched film about a week ago, they will give you a lot of different looks, both in their back end and with their defensive line. Again, I mentioned they're an undersized unit up front. So, again, you're playing against one of the better offensive lines in the country. Stunts, movements to try to create some penetration where maybe talent is lacking is going to be something you see a lot of. And it's going to be crucial for Penn State to be able to pick up these pressures in third downs for them to be able to extend their drives and go score points.
So this is a very underrated part and something that you and I watched, and you gave me some insight into defensive line play of like, hey, that's not right. Yep. Looking at some of the coverages and being like, I don't know what I'm looking at here. How important is it to just do the right thing as a football player and not make a mistake? We talk about like making plays and Abdul Carter being on the other side of the line of scrimmage, but you just need to like be in your spot at some point, right?
Yeah, I mean, you got to play within the frame of the defense. I can remember times here where we had all the talent on defense in the world, and then one guy is out of their gap, or one guy is trying to be a superhero and isn't doing his job. And against these types of running backs and the talent that you're going to play, if you're at Penn State, anybody can score at any time if one guy doesn't do their job. So it's crucial to the success of the defense.
Two new guys that I'll highlight up front. Mike Lockhart is going to be the nose tackle for West Virginia, presumably. Nobody put out a depth chart this week, and nobody knows who the starting quarterbacks are Aeneas. So who knows? But like that's my estimation. And then Edward Vesternen is their three technique. So they have two new defensive tackles coming in. Last year, watching them on film, those are two guys that I thought they needed to develop this offseason, because if they didn't, this front seven, I think, is going to struggle.
I agree. And one thing I would be remiss if I didn't mention is that my guy, Fatorma Mulba, who was originally at Penn State, transferred to West Virginia and is back in Beaver Stadium to play against the Nittany Lions. So that'll be interesting to see how he factors into their rotation as well.
Yeah, that's He's one of the guys, they had so many defensive transfers, he actually got there in January.
Yeah.
A bunch of the guys, we talk about Dante Cephas, and we'll get to this a little bit later in the show. Dante Cephas getting here in the summer is a very different thing, and West Virginia brought in a lot of transfers and a lot of guys that are important to their secondary especially. They got here in May, June. So, that's going to be a difficulty for them, I think, on defense in general. But talk to me a little bit about the matchup between Jared Bartlett and Olu Fashanu. This is one that you and I talked about a little bit last week when we were watching film. That defense, a 3 down front, but they walk a linebacker up. What do you see in that situation between those two in that interaction?
Just to be clear, I like Olu Fashanu in any matchup that he's in 2023. So let's get that clear right now. I will say, though, Jared Bartlett is a guy who is sneaky athletic. He's good with his hands, and he finds himself making plays all the time. He's always around the football, plays hard, and is definitely a leader of that defense. It's going to be important for Olu to minimize his effect, as he's very capable of doing.
One more Penn State connection. Fans probably know at this point, Lance Dixon, former Penn State linebacker, he is going to be one of the linebackers starting for West Virginia. So, in that 4 linebacker front, you've got one Penn Stater and you got one Penn Stater at a nose tackle. So, should be a fun matchup for the Nittany Lions. Do you like that going up against your former teammates, going against guys you know, even if it's just going back to recruiting?
Oh, it's a blast. It's a blast. I mean, there's so much trash talk that happens when there are no cameras and no Beaver Stadiums with 107,000 people that these young guys are having with each other. So it's exciting. Lance Dixon is another guy who came in 2019. We were both young guys together. He's super talented, so it'll be fun to see how he plays today.
We're going to go to another break. We have a feature for you. This is something that I just cooked up here for Penn State football fans because, Aeneas, we talk a lot here on the show. We talk a lot as the media. But we also, Penn State does an awesome job of getting us access to players, to coaches, and there's literally not enough time to get to all of it. So this is just a garbled amount of people talking about the game this week, and we're calling it This Week in Penn State Football. This Week in Penn State Football is brought to you by Bobby Ray Hall Lexus in Lewistown. Get ready to experience luxury like never before at Bobby Ray Hall Lexus of Lewistown. We are Nittany Valley's award-winning Lexus dealership located at 425 Electric Avenue. Visit us on the web at Bobby Ray Hall Lexus of Lewistown.com. We'll be back in just a bit.
We basically keep a record of everything. So every throw, completion percentage, is having all this data. Then you're able to go back and compare to historical data. You're able to compare it to Trace McSorley. But I think Drew's had I would say a good camp, and a camp that's given himself and the coaches and his teammates a bunch of confidence.
Now it's even better. We get to actually hit quarterbacks, get on the field, and really be violent. And I'm excited to show off what this defense can do.
I'm in the most challenge I've had in training camp when it comes to blocking since I've been here. And I think when it comes to playing in the games, I'm going to be more than prepared because I'm playing probably the best D-line that I might see all year.
You ask for like a definition or just like what does it mean that I'm number one? Yeah. It's a great opportunity, and I'm the type of guy I've been waiting on this since freshman year. Being behind guys, I feel like it was a humbling experience, and I kind of needed that. I learned a lot from it, but it's a time right now that I've been waiting for. I can't wait.
The QB draw is active, and different triple option, different. You could run a bunch of different stuff off of that. Having a running quarterback, so obviously something you game plan for sure. So
they're really just trying to get us to move our feet and get out and get our eyes off our key. I mean, that's the big thing offense likes to do, and they do it a lot and they do it well. I mean, we just got to be on the same mindset as our safeties and as well as our other linebackers. I mean, if we're all on the same page, I think we'll be good.
All off season, I was really working on film study, getting better at that, and recognizing route concepts or recognizing formations, just so I can put myself in more position to make even more plays on the ball. Because I feel like last year I was really just solely going off of athleticism and reaction, and now I feel like I'm starting to put myself in those positions to where I'm reading formations and I'm knowing what's coming.
I think everyone on the program or in the program knew how talented JB was, but I think this preseason he took a very big step in not only his development, but just everything all around. And I, alongside with everyone else in the program, was extremely excited for JB.
Like Coach Manny always says, you can't take money out of your teammates' pocket. You gotta know your assignment and execute your assignment. Sometimes so you can make a play, sometimes so your teammate can make a play.
Yeah, I'm tempering the expectations just a little bit in terms of the offensive production, even if there is a big run for Singleton or Katron, what have you. I just think it's time to temper those expectations just a little bit out of the gates.
Let's move on to the defense, because this is an exciting group to talk about. There can be a lot of fun things that happen on this side of the football. Is it fair to say this is the best collection of talent overall that Penn State has had on this side of the football? I know they've played well in the past, but in terms of talent-wise, Fitz, is this one of the best that you've seen coming into a season? And then specifically with what can that do against West Virginia?
I hate to say that, because Penn State's had some really good defenses, really good complementary defenses, and in the end, that's what's going to make them good, or make anyone good. But in terms of pure talent, there's a lot floating around here, and they've stacked it at some positions. Defensive end is, I think, as good as any position room in the league, really. So I'm excited to see how that can have an effect on the corners, have an effect on the coverage and things like that, because I think they're going to be very good. It's tough to look around and say that I've seen a faster defense at Penn State. Like this has the opportunity when you've got guys like Curtis Jacobs and Abdul Carter, 4 guys playing outside linebacker. That's different. Like those are different dudes on the outside. And then you throw in a complimentary piece like Kobe King, and you can see this all coming together. Of course, we're going to talk about defensive tackles. I mean, that's going to be something that's pressed this week. Is West Virginia's got a pretty good offensive line in the grand scheme of how good offensive lines can be. West Virginia's got some pieces in place that can be a pretty good offensive line. Got a good running game, good running back there. Quarterback still very much a question. I believe Garrett Green is the guy that's in Drew Allar's seat right now in terms of the guy that's going to start, that nobody's going to say is going to start. And he's, I don't think, nearly the threat of some quarterbacks Penn State's played in the past, but I think it's a real opportunity there, especially for this defensive tackle group to hold steady. It'll be interesting to judge what a successful defense is, because this defense has been played up really well, and I think rightfully so. I think this is an elite defense in college football. But every time you come out, like Nate said, with the first game, like there's an adjustment to be made there, and maybe West Virginia comes out running the ball. West Virginia's going to do everything they can to make this game end in 2.5 hours, like a baseball game these days. Like they're going to shorten the clock, try and get first downs, and let that clock run, because that's, kind of how the things go with the new college football rules, which I don't think will change everything totally, but you're going to get cheated out of, 10 plays that you would have seen in a game last year. So I think West Virginia is going to try all they can do to shorten up this game, keep it close to the football, and run.
This is the Penn State Tailgate Show 2023. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships, celebrating more than 40 years of service to the community. Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships has a vehicle to fit your budget and transportation needs. Home of the $1,000 lowest price guarantee with 19 locations throughout Pennsylvania. I have a Blaze Alexander car, Aeneas Hawkins.
I might need to get a Blaze Alexander car,
So we're back here on the Penn State Tailgate Show. I'm Thomas Reinkard. That is former Penn State defensive tackle Aeneas Hawkins. We are discussing the upcoming game between West Virginia and Penn State. We're checking out each individual part, and I'm nerding out about football, talking with somebody who knows what they're talking about. And I wanted to get into the quarterback. We're 28 minutes, 30 minutes into the program, and I haven't made you talk to me about the quarterback yet. There is no announced starter for either team this week. But if you listen to both head coaches talking about their players, we know that Drew Allar and Garrett Green are the starting quarterbacks. So I want to phrase it to you this way, and this is a media question. I'm not going to ask you a football question. This is the debate thing. Do you play to the experience of your quarterback and you manage him, and like he's his first start, you don't let him go out there and do everything that you would do with a starter, or do you let him play? What do you think in terms of what Penn State should do tonight with their new starter?
I think when you have a guy who's not named Drew Allar. You play to the expectations a little bit. You play it safe. Drew Allar has proven himself worthy of this opportunity. I think you let him go out there, you let him throw that football around, and you let him open it up and get comfortable early and often. Again, the kid's not going to be perfect. He's going to make a mistake eventually. The good news is he has a huge depth of talent all around him on the offensive side of the football that's going to cover up some of those mistakes and keep him in a good position to lead his team to victory. So I definitely am a proponent of letting Drew Allar go in that stadium tonight and throw that football around.
Okay, listen, Aeneas, this is why you're wrong. Actually, this is why this is why I'm terrible at the modern media, because I agree with you 100%. Like you want this guy to go out and play, and you want him to eventually be the leader of your team. You want him to be a huge part of the success in 2023, and you're not going to do that by playing him with kid gloves. And I understand you got Nick Singleton and you got Kaytron Allen, but he's got to grow up. October, there are some big games, and there's some big games in September as well. You got to go on the road to Illinois, 1-0 mentality. We'll talk about West Virginia, but that is what you're building throughout the season, getting 1% better every day, right? That's the Penn State model.
Yep.
He's got to go out there and make those mistakes. He's got to go out there and make those throws and be the guy you need him to be eventually, right?
He has to, because guess what? No matter who you are, you're going to have to play against some teams with some guys who are going to put you in bad situations, and you're going to make mistakes. The adversity is coming for Drew Allar at some point. Yeah. Whether it's tonight or it's week 7 is irrelevant. Get him ready for that. Him struggling and going through some of those growth demanding environments and adjustments that he's going to have to make is a good thing for the longevity of Drew and his overall progression.
So let's take a look at him versus the West Virginia defense. What did you see from them on film, and what are the opportunities or what are the things that we can see tonight from him? Is he going to have the opportunity to throw for 300-plus yards and a couple touchdowns?
I certainly think he will, and I think he'll have that opportunity earlier if they get that run game established more quickly. Obviously, Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen are huge threats in themselves. So if they got to stack the box, if they got to man up on the outside, or even with their tight ends, Theo Johnson and Tyler Warren, we talked about it earlier. I think they're a big matchup problem for West Virginia safeties. You got 2 NFL tight ends that nobody's really talking about as the primary weapons on that offense. So I expect to see the run game get going early and then Drew kind of fill in later on.
So this is something that I watched and, checking out the film last year. This is a defense that last year was in transition, bringing in a lot of new faces, some injuries. Getting some feedback from the West Virginia fans here on the YouTube channel has been awesome, actually. They filled in some knowledge gaps that I had in terms of, okay, this guy was injured. They had to shuffle some things around. But the end result was there were a lot of mistakes last year. There was a lot of problems in coverage where guys were not doing the things that they were supposed to do. And then when you throw on top of that at certain times they just got beat, I think that this is an opportunity for Drew and for the offense to go and attack. This is something I want to ask, and you don't have to have an answer to this. I just think this is really interesting. West Virginia plays a cover 4, which is 2 deep safeties, and then your corners are playing off. You're keeping a lid on the deep ball. And yet every time I see a cover 4 team that runs safeties at 8 to 10 yards and it's truly keeping a lid on it, offensive coordinators cannot help themselves. You attack that more than you would if it was a defense that ran a couple of different things. First off, what's up with that? Secondly, is that something you think Penn State's going to do tonight against this defense that is trying to keep a lid on an explosive passing attack?
Yeah, I expect them to see West Virginia run more of that cover 4 look. I think a lot of times you see teams exclusively run cover 4 like we saw West Virginia doing a lot of last year when there is a genuine lack of maybe some of the talent you need to play up close and to be able to still defend against that deep ball. I'm not sure what their secondary is going to look like tonight, obviously replacing some key guys, but I expect to see a lot of 4. But again, if you want to run cover 4, we got a kid named Kaytron Allen who's going to run for 7.3 a carry. You know, so you got to kind of pick your poison there. I would expect to see some more variety in their calls tonight than maybe what we saw last year.
Yeah, that's a fascinating thing about week 1. How do you prepare for the unpreparable where you don't know what they're going to do and everything that I spent 2 weeks watching film. Maybe none of that shows up tonight. How do you handle, is it more than about what you want to do and less about what the opponent is going to do?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of go into it with the understanding week 1 that you may get a completely different look than what you prepared for the last month. And that's where it becomes crucial that a guy like Manny Diaz and Mike Yurcich is able to see the things that are going on, make adjustments both on the field at halftime and then obviously in the second half as well, because you can get anything in week 1. I think you brought up a good point with West Virginia earlier. One thing Penn State can't do is go and shoot themselves in the foot with turnovers and penalties. That's something I see all the time in week 1. So if they eliminate those things, I don't see why their offense will find some success.
So one thing that we heard James Franklin talk about earlier on This Week in Penn State Football, Drew Allar not throwing interceptions in camp. Is that obviously that's encouraging, but is that showing a level of hesitance to throw the football into situations where you got a big arm and you can gunsling it, or is that just him being really good at being quarterback? How do you read that?
Yeah, I don't read it as him being too timid to throw the ball. When you're out there at practice, the entire purpose of it is to get guys to try things that maybe they wouldn't feel comfortable trying in games, maybe when there is some timidness. So I'm sure he's out there slinging it around. I will say I heard the Franklin quote where he went 13 or 14 practices without throwing an interception. I played 4 years at Penn State. I've never seen a quarterback go that long without throwing a pick. So if true, color me impressed.
Yeah. That kind of leads into just the general thing to wrap up with the quarterback position and with Drew Allar. How much I guess what's the delta between potential and how everyone feels about him and actually getting to that level of performance where you are that former 5-star? And just kind of a background on where I'm coming with this is I went back through the last, I want to say 5 or 6 years of former top 3 quarterbacks in their draft class. 2 of those guys every year put up in their second year when they were the full-time starter over 3,500 yards, over 30 touchdowns. So they were a significant driver of their offense. Do you need that from Drew Allar, and do you want, would you prefer to see that? Do you want that to be something you see immediately this first week?
I don't think you need to see that from Drew in order for Penn State football to win, but for Drew to live up to the expectations and the hype that have been placed on him as a former 5-star, as this guy who's supposed to take Penn State football to the next level, he has to take a big step in year 2. I think you're right on the money. In this era of 2023 and recently, there is no excuse. There is no longer the 3-4 year window you're giving quarterbacks to develop in college before they take their shot as the starter. The expectation is that he's going to find a way to do well and be a big part of the offense's success in year 2.
What was your recruiting class?
I was a 2018 kid.
It feels like that was just yesterday.
Yeah, it does.
But you said something that I think is incredibly important. These guys are being trained in high school at a different level now. Even from 2018 to now, do you see a difference in the preparedness of even young guys not at quarterback who don't have the quarterback coaches and the Brad Mandlers of the world? Are guys coming in more prepared than they used to?
Certainly. I think it's a couple things. It's 7-on-7s getting more serious throughout the country, but let's not forget we're in the information era. If you're a high-level athlete, if you're a high-level quarterback and you want to go learn how to get better, everything is a Google and a YouTube search away. So many guys are sharing their recipes to success, and that's why you're seeing guys ready so early.
Despite this not a debate that we just had because we agreed on this, Drew Allar, as I've said several times here on the show, hasn't officially been named the starter yet. By the way, totally off the topic, I made a social media post this week where I made that joke, and the internet didn't get it.
It was funny.
Yeah, nobody thought it was funny, so I apologize, but I'm going to do it one more time. This is where we start our open practice highlights. As always, you can see the highlights each week on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. I narrate those for you and give you my insights into practice. So I thought that'd be something great that we could bring here to the Tailgate show and give you my observations and insights. Open practice highlights are powered by Nittany Beverage. Nittany Beverage has been serving State College and the surrounding area since 1965. Nittany Beverage, 193 North Patterson Street in State College. Make it your choice. If you're watching on the stream, enjoy seeing the highlights. If you're listening on the 99.5 The Bus, enjoy more of my voice. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, and these are Penn State practice highlights. If you want to get an inside look at what's going on each week with the Nittany Lions, subscribe to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel for a fresh batch of videos before every game. Drew Allar is definitely not the starting quarterback on Saturday.
I want to say that we got to practice 13 or 14 before we had a turnover, an interception, specifically with Drew.
Definitely not.
There's difference being the starter and playing starter type reps. So nice ball!
Okay, so Franklin won't make an official announcement, but you get what's going on here, right? Franklin went on to say that he wants Allar to let the game come to him and not to force anything. The 6'5" quarterback has the poise and skill to be elite, but he needs to get through the first few games undefeated to get the experience that the team needs him to have for the season that they want to have. All eyes will be on Allar Saturday night, presuming he's the starter. But Allar isn't stepping onto the field alone. In fact, we just talked about how Franklin wants him to know he doesn't have to do it all on his own. The players that'll help him? How about potential all-everything candidate Nick Singleton? Singleton's explosive style and violence at the contact point can help exploit a West Virginia defense that has 4 new starters in the front 7. He and Katron Allen will likely be the engine that makes the Penn State offense go in Game 1 and the rest of the 2023 season. On the opposite side of the ball, the Penn State linebackers practicing interception skills during Wednesday's practice. West Virginia quarterback Garrett Green brings a dynamic element to his game on the ground, but he threw 3 interceptions in 2 games to end 2022 and left a couple more on the table. If his gunslinging ways aren't behind him, someone on the Penn State defense could come up with a big, timely play this Saturday. That does it for a look at Penn State practice. I'm Thomas Frank Carr.
And a contractor, technically.
How do you prepare without preparing off season?
Yeah.
How do you prepare without preparing for too much? Because football, I feel like at times can be kind of chasing your own tail of well, maybe this could happen, maybe that could happen. And how do you not over prepare but make sure that you are as prepared as possible?
It's just about having a set of rules to your defenses that they apply to everything, and you just go through that checklist in your mind before the play, and that really gets you to react to what you're seeing, because you can't memorize everything in this game. This is a reactive game, so you have to be able to react based upon what you're seeing and apply those to the rules you've been given in day 1 install.
So it's always a fun thing to try and figure out on the front end, like matchups and individual players and all of those things. But when it comes to your team, just going back to Abdul Carter, he mentioned something, we were talking about coverage, and he said he was working with some corners and some safeties on the team. I hope I'm quoting him right here, to match his eyes with his feet. Can you explain what he means by that in terms of coverage and making sure, kind of what that quote means?
Yeah, it's just knowing what's around you, knowing what zones and what matchups other guys have, and being able to see through your zone. Honestly, you don't want to have your feet like float you into someone else's area of work. So you gotta really be disciplined with your eyes and know what you're seeing, and that'll take you where you need to go to do your job.
How hard is that? And how much is there that's trying to distract you from your job in a given play or in a given game?
Well, in any given play, there can be something that could take your eyes off of. It could be something simple as them motioning from 3x1 to 2x2. That just it'll change stuff for us. But just being able to be disciplined and apply our rules to that helps tremendously.
Where has, speaking of Abdul, have you seen him progress in that particular area as a guy who is going into his 2nd year and, coming originally in high school from the defensive line, playing linebacker the last couple of years, having, a big year last year, but being young and having to kind of grow maybe front to back in terms of being a great run defender, having all of those tools, but then having to learn that part of the game. How have you seen him evolve and adapt
it's
since
just
then?
been that mental aspect, really. Obviously, since he's been here, he's showed that he's a freakish athlete. He can do it all in that aspect, but it's just the way I'm most proud of in the development is the being able to see things and anticipate things and attack even better based upon that. And that makes you a scary football player in my eyes.
Celebrating more than 40 years of service to the community, Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships has a vehicle to fit your budget and transportation needs. Home of the $1,000 lowest price guarantee with 19 locations throughout Pennsylvania. This is the Penn State Tailgate Show powered by Blaze Alexander. We are here outside of the Bryce Jordan Center. I haven't even mentioned that. We're outside the Bryce Jordan Center. You can see Beaver Stadium just over our shoulder. It is a beautiful day in Happy Valley. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, Aeneas Hawkins, former Penn State defensive tackle, and now media extraordinaire with his own podcast. I'll give you the platform to plug your work.
Check us out, the Lions Den, hosting the first player-led Penn State football podcast with Nick Dawkins, Jerry Cross. Just dropped our first episode. YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. Be sure to check us out.
This is a really cool thing about the world you and I live in as one maybe 20, 30 years ago when we were growing up, or 15 years ago when we were growing up. We're not that old yet. Where we have the opportunity to do something like this, where I'm setting up with my equipment, we're streaming live on the internet, and a former Penn State player can sit down and talk with his former teammates and give that access on that level of a player-to-player level. And I just want to get into a little bit of that here before we get back to the show of, like, how important is that to you, and how much do you enjoy those conversations? Because I apologize, I haven't had a chance to talk to check it out yet, but the only thing I've heard is that it was amazing, and you guys are hilarious.
Well, I appreciate that. I'll tell you what, it's really easy for young men, not just at Penn State, but across the country, to get locked in on who they are as football players and wrap their entire identities up into that. Obviously with the rule changes of NIL and those types of things, one benefit, one positive that I think that's come out of that is it creates an environment in which these young student athletes are able to see themselves as more than just football players. They're able to share a story. We go on there, we talk football, we talk shop, but at the same time we get off on our tangents. We open up about who we are and the things that we're interested in beyond just football.
So make sure you check out his podcast. You can check out the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. And, of course, if you're listening here on 99.5 The Bus, I think you should probably have that as a preset in your car. We're just giving everyone their love and their plugs today. Let's talk some football again. Let's get into the skill positions around Drew Allar. And I know we were going to talk about receivers and tight ends, but I just realized we haven't actually talked about Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. We haven't given them their love yet. So where do you start when you've got something that's really good and everyone knows it's really good? I want to bring some sort of insight to this situation, but what do you got in terms of, like, what to expect to see? How do you think this game is going to go? Where do you want to? How would you characterize them tonight on the field for the Nittany Lions?
Yeah, it's interesting because both of them had tremendous freshman seasons, obviously. Yeah. So you want to refrain from critiquing to a degree. I think they both have things they can work on. Katron can continue to get better athletically, and I know he did in the offseason. Nick Singleton is a guy who could take the top off of a defense at any time, but how has he continued to progress running the football, going through his progressions, and knowing when to go hit that hole, right? The next thing I'll tell you is in year 2, I thought they were already really good pass blockers, but I would love to see them turn into great pass catching options out of the backfield. We talk about, and we'll get into it, some of the questions that are at the receiver position. One thing that takes some of the pressure off of that is when Nick Singleton is swinging and running angle routes out of the backfield and adds another threat to the offense.
Yeah, that is something that I think Penn State fans have been hoping to see. It's I got in trouble this week because I said I don't really care for screens. So, like, throw into the running back on a screen. But I think you make a great point running an angle route, getting him involved downfield, because defenses are built to rally to the football, right? If you're one-on-one, that's one thing, but teams like West Virginia, they're built so that they want you to throw some of those screens. They want you to throw short. And I know Nick Singleton can, run his face mask through a brick wall, but you don't want him doing that all the time. The value to me is always getting the ball into his hands down the football field. So just that part aside, let's get into the running, the tight ends and the receivers. It's been a debate all offseason. You're going to run 3 receivers, you're going to run 2 tight ends, because you got to decide what you're going to be as your base personnel identity. What do you see for Penn State tonight? Do you see them coming out 3 receivers, or do you see them coming out with 2 tight ends and having those big physical fronts and forcing West Virginia, with the size you talked about, to try and match them in the trenches?
I expect a ton of 12 personnel tonight. We got Theo Johnson. Tyler Warren is around, 2 tight ends who are able to not only compete at a high level in the Big Ten, but will probably be both good NFL options at the tight end position. And then, like you said, it provides another level of run blocking and support up front that you're able to provide for Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. Another thing to keep in mind in that 12 personnel with 2 guys at tight end who are able to get vertical is you might see some play action passes for big plays. That's why I say, again, they need to really go in there and establish that run game early and often, and that's why 12 personnel is going to be so pivotal tonight.
Something I wrote at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com talking about the matchups between the tight ends and the safeties. The safeties last year and the linebackers were kind of a sore point for this West Virginia defense, where part of this conversation we talked about coverage and running plays are married together, because as a defensive tackle, Aeneas, how many times did you know exactly what play was coming before the snap?
Not a whole lot, I'm going to be honest.
There were
definitely a couple times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there were a couple times. Not very often. I wasn't as good as the other ones, but yeah.
But so if you're a safety and you're expecting run, you're seeing
Yep.
12 personnel, you're seeing Theo Johnson coming off the line of scrimmage, you know the identity of this Penn State offense. They were very physical coming downhill, and a lot of times a lot of guys get behind them. I went into some of the analytics, and the worst defense they played was against 12 personnel packages, where the tight ends were able to get down the field on those safeties who had to creep up into the box. And you're trying to do two things. If you're a safety, you're playing deep, you're playing close, you're trying to keep a lid on the run. I think that's just, as you said, the perfect opportunity for play action and RPO especially. Can you talk to me a little bit about, even if it isn't play action, how you see RPO affect offenses in college?
Yeah, well, RPOs just are such a creative type of play call, and it puts the defense under a lot of stress, right? Because up front, you're getting a run read, and then in the secondary, you may be getting a run read, and all of a sudden, that X receiver is breaking a slant off on you, and you're not prepared for it. It gives the quarterback, if a guy is able to make good decisions at a consistent level, RPOs are a great fit for him. I do want to circle back to one thing you said in the play action game. We talked about Mike Yurcich going up to the box. A lot of times you'll see offensive coordinators call different looks that may look like an inside zone, or maybe they'll actually call an inside zone to see how quickly that safety is going to fly down there. And if that safety flies down too quick, keep an eye out, because 11 plays later, you may get the same look, and it's going to be an 80-yard touchdown over the top of his head. So it's interesting how all those things are going to play together tonight.
How much do coaches talk to players about that, of like, hey, I'm calling this for a reason? So, like, yes, this is part of our base offense, but here's what I'm looking for. Is there that level of communication, or is it more like, I'm going to call this play, and then I'm going to call the next play when I'm ready, if you're the coordinator?
There's levels to it. Sean Spencer was my D-line coach, and one thing he used to always say is there's 100 level, there's 200 level, and there's 300 level. When you come into Penn State and you're a freshman, Sean Spencer's not explaining anything he's calling to you for any reason. When you got an old head in the building, a guy who knows the game and understands how plays are called, then maybe there's more of a discussion.
So the receiver position for Penn State, that's been something we've talked about all offseason long. We're going to see it finally tonight on the field at Beaver Stadium, 7:30 kickoff. We're taking you through the next half hour or so, next 40 minutes, talking Penn State football here on the Tailgate Show. But we're going to see the results here on the field shortly. How do you feel about the receiver position?
I'm excited about the receiver position. I've been pretty public and open about challenging two guys in Keandre Lambert-Smith and Trey Wallace, who are going to have to step up and really be two guys that the offense can count on consistently. Both of those guys have all kinds of talent and the ability to do it. And again, it's no secret, especially this week, that third receiver spot has been a big question. Who steps up and fills that role? Obviously, Dante Cephas transfers in. A guy that's been a sleeper in this conversation the entire time, in my opinion, is Liam Clifford. A guy who played some valuable reps last year and did a good job. Smart kid. So it'll be interesting to see how that room adjusts. I do think you got to have a guy like Dre step up in his senior season and be that leader and be the go-to guy for Penn State's offense.
Do you expect that? Do you expect the level of consistency you're looking for from him, that he can be the guy every single game and he can absorb multiple catches and be used all over the formation, everything that James Franklin talked about him this week? Do you believe that he can do that and he will?
I certainly do. It's funny because regardless of the position, what you see from guys a lot in the offseason, when they know it's their time to step up and make that big leap, their offseason reflects it. They work hard. They're consistent about their work. They're consistently focusing on the details in their craft. From all the feedback I've gotten, Keandre Lambert-Smith has done that at a high level. I've seen it before. I saw Jahan Dotson go from KJ Hamler's number two guy, the kind of backup in that situation, to being the man next year, and the steps and the focus that it took to get there.
So how does that, and this is, I don't want this to come off as like a, well, what are you doing? But like, how do you get that to happen sooner so that you have those guys maturing before they have to take the steps? So you see a little bit the year before. How does that work, where you get kind of an accelerated timeline for players? Because some guys come in, we'll get to the defense in a little bit. Tony Rojas, he seems like he's coming out of the gate hot, but some guys it takes a little bit longer. How do you pull that out of somebody that you know has the talent and you want them to do it before they are forced to do it as the guy?
Yeah, well, one thing you got to do is show them other young guys who have been able to come in, compete, and then earn a legitimate role. You got to let those young guys know that their work is not going to be for nothing. Coach Franklin calls it red shirt mode when you're a freshman, where it's like, I'm not going to play, so I'm not going to work as hard as I need to. And then what that leads to is guys in the next year not being ready to take that leap when they want to. So I think that's one thing. Another thing I'll say is that Coach Franklin does a really good job of is creating competitive environments. With the depth on this roster now, there's so much young talent that the old guys who are in front of them and are supposed to be the starters can't take days off, because the young guys behind them are talented enough to take their jobs. So anytime you can create competitive environments like that, it's going to help guys mature and be ready earlier.
So I think this is an area, going back to the Drew Allar conversation, of do you want him to be ready week 1, or do you want him to grow into being the QB1 throughout the course of the season, so when you get to the heart of Big Ten play, he's ready to go? I think we're going to see a similar situation with the receiver position. We both just talked about how we think that the tight ends are going to be a big part of today, and this matchup situation, the X's and O's, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yep. We're going to see a lot of the tight ends tonight. But they're going to need 3 receivers at some point this year. And I think Liam Clifford, I'm glad you mentioned him. He impressed me during camp, during our brief windows. He just looks like a guy that has fit Marcus Hagans' coaching style really well, as a guy who is 200 pounds, very physical, but is in that slot position. But the reason and part of the conversation about moving Keandre Lambert-Smith into the slot was it gave him the ability to be electric in 2 directions. If you have to move him outside of that, you are no longer in plan A. So I still think it's an important thing for one of those guys, Dante Cephas at that Z position, Amari Evans, who flashed and kind of stepped up at the end of spring. That has to continue. That battle, we talk about it during camp. That battle is going to continue in the regular season. How many situations do you see where somebody eventually became a starter or took starter-type reps throughout the year through their work? How much does that happen on a football team?
It happens all the time, and a lot of times when you have a competition that may not be solved in training camp, Coach Franklin is not afraid of letting that thing stretch on until somebody absolutely establishes themselves as that guy. Mm-hmm. It's not a lot of coaches will get caught up in favorites and who they're supposed to put on the field. Coach James Franklin is not like that. He's going to put the guys out there who are going to give them the best chance to win. I think what is probably happening, more so than Penn State not having a guy that can be that third receiver, is you have a lot of guys who can be the third receiver. So now it's about who the best option is for that offense.
So we're going to see how that works out the next couple of weeks. Aeneas and I are going to keep talking about it, and we are going to have a great time here on the Penn State Tailgate Show. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. He is Aeneas Hawkins, and we're going to get into our next feature here. That is, let me find out where we are. I believe we're going into doing this live. Sometimes you get lived, but I believe we are going into our next feature, which is the Coach's Corner. And we'll get you that information about what head coach James Franklin said right now.
I'm Jason Reno with Williams Alexander Subaru of Lewistown. Did you know 96% of all Subaru...
Did I mess that up? Oh, top of next block. Three examples of tight ends having big days. Jatavian Sanders for Texas, 5 for 5, 78 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an RPO-heavy offense with Steve Sarkisian. Baylor, Ben Sims and Drake Danby combined for 7 catches for 84 yards. Sammy Wheeler and Ben Sinnott of K-State, we talked about them, 5 for 129. And again, I went back to that K-State game. That's a big indicator to me of similar enough play style from K-State to Penn State, and similar enough talent with tight ends and Deuce Vaughn at running back that they had a good day against that defense. And last year we talked about this 2 high coverage shell. It's not just cover 4, 6, 2. They do a little bit of everything in that situation. Here's how the Penn State tight ends did against that last year. So this is against 2 high defenses, all of them included. 19 catches for 320 yards and 4 touchdowns. If you're playing along at home, that's nearly 17 yards per reception. That is, to me, that's the answer. Theo Johnson, if he's going to have this potentially All-American season, if he's going to go all year long and be this huge play guy, this is a perfect game for him to do that. And I've talked about this. This is the one matchup I'll point out today. We talked about Marcus Floyd. Last year transferring into the defense. Now it's his second year at that safety position. He can have improved play. He can be better at not overrunning his assignments and not being caught flat-footed on play actions and RPOs. Or he can still struggle at that. And even if he doesn't, he's not 6'6", 260. And he doesn't run a 4.5 in a straight line. Theo Johnson does all of those things. And if let's say that Anthony Wilson is a really smart player and has digested the entire playbook and he's ready to go week 1. He's 5'9", 194. Is that a matchup you want in your coverage shell for the tight ends? Theo Johnson, Tyler Warren, physically they've taken a step forward this offseason. They should be able to line up and run on these guys and then play action off of that, knowing Singleton and K-Tron. Do you see where we're going here? The tight ends are going to be a huge factor in this game, in my opinion. I think that it's going to be it's going to be one of the deciding factors if they can hit Theo Johnson on some big plays and if the tight ends can help this running game and overpower West Virginia up front. So to me, you talk about where are you starting? Running backs, running the ball, receivers, throwing the ball. I think you start with the tight ends and how are you going to use them and then build your plan from there, because we didn't even mention Khalil. Back to the Blaze, Alexander Family Dealerships Tailgate 2023. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. He is Aeneas Hawkins. We are going to take a quick second here to tell you that the Coach's Corner is brought to you by Your Cigar Den, and we're going to hear from head coach James Franklin right now.
Penn State football has a whole lot of new this season. New experiences and upgrades around Beaver Stadium, new challenges to overcome, and even new rules to contend with. We'll get to all of those today in the Coach's Corner. One thing that isn't new to football is injuries. This week, Penn State football was dealt a blow on the offensive line before the start of the season. Starting left guard Landon Tengwall announced on social media that he's retiring from football due to an injury. James Franklin addressed.
I went way too long in that last segment. So we're gonna.
You said you went too long?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I thought we had 2 segments left. We have a third one. Oh yeah.
Be as respectful of their process as possible.
The team now turns to JUCO transfer J.B. Nelson to fill the void. Nelson is a player that the staff expected to see starter-like reps anyway, but now he's thrust into a full-time position with the News. The most exciting new aspect of Penn State football this year is the prospect of a new starting quarterback. Although naming a new quarterback is something James Franklin has only done twice in his time at Penn State, with Trace McSorley and Sean Clifford winning their respective quarterback battles. Now heading into his 10th year as head coach, Franklin won't name the winner of the battle between Allar and Bo Pribula.
And he's been really, really good. His decision-making's been good. His completion percentage has been really good. And then another thing that's really cool is having all this data, then you're able to go back and compare to historical data. You're able to compare it to Trace McSorley. You're able to compare it to Sean Clifford. But I think Drew's had I would say, a good camp, and a camp that's given himself and the coaches and his teammates a bunch of confidence.
As a former 5-star player, Allar has the most talent of almost any quarterback that Franklin and his staff have recruited over their time at Penn State. Much of the optimism of this upcoming season rests on Allar eventually developing into a game-changing quarterback. And that's the most important new element of the 2023 season, a new opportunity for Penn State football to reach the Big Ten championship with a loaded defense and 2 of the best freshmen running back in the country from a season ago, poised for a breakout season. For the first time in over 30 years, Penn State has the chance to play West Virginia. So if you're a diehard Penn State fan from the 60s, 70s, or 80s, this game has meaning and significance. But to the Penn State players, this is just a new team they've never played.
No, because again, when you talk about history and you talk about recent history, again, I don't think there's been a game played while these guys were alive. You know, there's not a whole lot of storylines that would make sense for them. Besides, you know, there's a lot of guys on their team that they know through the recruiting process or from the region, guys that they played with in high school.
By the way, after generations of the clock stopping on first down, the NCAA has done away with that rule. Now the clock
how much longer to
first down, except for in end of game and 2-minute situations. Is Franklin a fan of the new rule?
I know we'd like to fit the football game into a tight, neat box. The NFL is fascinating that it's almost exactly the same time every single game, which I think helps. But I also don't hear anybody complaining about football and watching football and enjoying football. So I think there's reasons why we're doing it other than maybe specifically what we're stating we're doing it for.
And finally, there's some new faces for fans to know. Transfer Dante Cephas joined the program this summer from Kent State, and fellow wide receiver Malik McClain came over from Florida State in January. But last season, the Penn State recruiting class of 2022 changed the trajectory of the program for the better, with Singleton, Allen, Abdul Carter, and Drew Shelton playing big roles for the team. Who are the young players that will get a chance to do that this year?
The guys that right now have been green lighted, I'll probably just keep it to that, is Tony Rojas, King Mack, Zion Tracy, and Elliott Washington. What these guys, I would say, is these guys have shown that they're the closest not just to play on defense, but also have significant roles on special teams.
There you have it. You're all caught up with everything new going on with Penn State football. That's the Coach's Corner. We'll be back with more of the Penn State Football Tailgate Show after this on 99.5, 107.5, The Bus.
The Coach's Corner, powered by Your Cigar Den and Monte Cristo Lounge, with free, easy in and out parking and all your tailgating needs. Check out Your Cigar Den and New Casa Cuba Lounge on Colonnade Boulevard next to Wegmans. We'll be back. We're talking defense finally, coming up on the Blaze Alexander Tailgate Show 2023.
The summer sales event is going on now at the newly renovated Blaze Alexander.
Another play I wanted to get to, this one here. So if there's been one thing that I think was an area to develop for Grunkmeyer, it's throwing on the run to this direction. Throwing, going to his right. I believe it was from last year, seeing this a couple times. He a little bit inconsistent with his accuracy when rolling to his right, and just making sure that everything stays square and everything he's supposed to do. And he misses this pass, but we're going to, again, break this one down and show you what's going on. So let it run first to see, okay, so this is a rolling pocket, getting away from the pressure, over the receiver, incompletion, and you go to play another down. And initially, this is another one of the throws when I said, like, not the sharpest game from Grunkmeyer, but once again, there's a couple things I want to point out that maybe it's not a perfect throw, but if you look and you can see the right here, even if it's not perfectly clear, this linebacker, he's trying to thread this ball over top of a linebacker in between a safety, who you can see better here, to the tight end. So this is a tight window. He's throwing over that defender, and watching it on film the first time, couldn't really get the depth and gauge where the players were on the field. But here, you can see this is, Mike Yurcich calls these 1-inch throws, because you got to get this ball 1 inch over the linebacker's hands so you can drop it directly into your tight end before it gets over to the safety trailing behind, or whatever coverage defender this is behind here. And you can see it's just a little high, and I think the safety mistimes this jump a little bit as well. So not a perfect connection from two guys that throw together quite a bit. I think if he's a little higher on this, he jumps a little earlier, he might get a hand on it. And that might be where Grunkmeyer was expecting him to be. But still a little bit high from Grunkmeyer, a little bit off target, but not a bad throw. I think, you go to the college level, you go to Penn State, and you're going to have a tight end that's probably going to be able to catch that. And again, this is the Division I tight end, but Penn State's tight ends are freakazoids, right? So you're gonna have a little bit more of a window here. But if there's a thing you want to clean up, if you want to point out, like, yeah, this isn't perfect, and we have a pretty high bar for Ethan Grunkmeyer in terms of accuracy and ball placement, maybe you'd say this one. But now that I'm looking at it, and you've got this guy who he's got to get the ball over this guy, I think this is a fine throw. Where before I thought that was a pretty bad miscalculation. I don't think that after seeing this angle. Again, Ryan getting this angle for us is really awesome, because then I don't have to be wrong forever and have that in my brain incorrectly. So you see some of these things from different angles, and that's why you always want to watch, if you can find it, coach's film or stuff that's a little bit, giving you a bigger picture.
It's a long and bumpy road to the Big Ten Championship. Let's see how other teams are faring today. Here's Around the Big Ten. Sponsored by Joseph C. Hazel, Plumbing and Heating, Sprinklers and Backflows. They're your one-stop for quality, affordable sprinkler systems, HVAC, plumbing and backflow services. Call 1-4-355-4841 for a free estimate today. PA number 012698.
All right, so let's take a trip around the Big Ten. We'll start on Thursday, as most people know the results of this game. But, I like formality and I like completion I like making sure everyone has all the information. Minnesota lost to Nebraska in Matt Rule's first game as Nebraska head coach, 13-10. Michigan State over Central Michigan, 31-7. Going on right now. Ohio State up 10-3 over Indiana in the third quarter. A close game with the Buckeyes coming out in week 1. Wisconsin 14-10 over Buffalo in the third quarter. Townsend loses to Maryland. I know this is a shocker here. Townsend losing to Maryland 28-3. And of course, coming up, Penn State, West Virginia. The 2023 season for the Penn State Nittany Lions kicks off at 7:30. You can catch the live broadcast of that on 99.5 The Bus. We've got to get to the defense, and Aeneas, of course I did this. We spent the whole show talking about the offense. I got lost in the sauce.
We did.
And you're the defensive guy, so let's talk about the Penn State defense. Give me what you think of this group and what you think of their opportunity tonight. At least it's good that I think they're really awesome. And it's pretty clear that they're going to be awesome, right?
It's super duper clear. I have never had higher expectations for a Penn State defensive unit, especially not in the last 5 years. I look top to bottom at who they have on that field, and not just the starters, the depth behind those guys is really impressive. You get a guy like Zaki Wheatley, Keaton Ellis, the State College native, Jalen Reed, and then I go to the defensive line. We talk about Adisa Isaac coming back year 2 off of a big injury. We finally get to see him at his best. Chop Robinson is as good of a pass rusher as there is in the country, and guess what? Their backup, denied Dennis Sutton, could end up being better than both of them.
Yeah.
Talent all over the place. We haven't even mentioned the infamous number 11 Abdul Carter, who's going to get the opportunity to play tonight in front of one of his OGs, Micah Parsons, in that 11. I expect them to perform at a high level, and really week 1 is an opportunity to put the country on notice.
Yeah.
I know they have aspirations to be the best defense in the country, and you get the opportunity to try to go prove that in week 1 tonight.
Neil Brown in his opening press conference all the way back on Monday was asked about Penn State having 6 players on the freaks list, and he's like, oh, we know which ones are the freaks. And this defense is loaded with freaks. In that vein, talking about what that group of athletes and football players, more importantly, guys, Kalen King said this week that he's gotten better, and he was playing on athleticism last year, and now he understands the game deeper. Like, what do you expect in this game? Tone setter, shutout? How far can I push you down that road into a hot take?
I won't give you a shutout in week 1. A lot of mistakes in week 1, but I do not see West Virginia coming into Beaver Stadium and scoring more than 10 points, and that's a statement I'm willing to make publicly with confidence.
So talk about the matchup here, and we did this on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube show where we talked about the running game really being what sets the tone for West Virginia. Outside zone, I'm a fan of outside zone. I talk about it way too much. For the people out there that don't know what I'm talking about, can you explain why, what it is and what the advantages are for an offense and how you counter then as a defense?
Yeah, outside zone is a tough play specifically to stop when you're a defensive lineman because which snap, right? So a lot of times you can catch yourself behind a step or two. The reason I'm not worried about it tonight for Penn State's front is because if you remember last year, it was well documented. Everybody's complaining about the size of the D tackles. They're too small, they're too small, they're too small. Well, one thing small D tackles are good at is getting vertical against the outside zone, which makes it really tough to run. And again, with the depth of all the pieces that they have in that front 7 with Penn State, I look to see a rotation get going early. It's easy to get tired out chasing sideline to stop the run, so look for guys to get rotated early and often.
So what does that do then? Team speed obviously is great against a situation like that with West Virginia. And, it's not just outside zone talking about one particular scheme. They run a couple of different things up front, but a big part of it, especially last year at the end of the season, Garrett Green brought a different dynamic. And we always say that. We always say, oh, the running quarterback or the athletic quarterback brought a different dynamic. What dynamic is that making you deal with as a D lineman or in the front 7?
Yeah, the thing that makes a guy like Garrett Green so dangerous, and when they say that with dual threat quarterbacks, it's the reality that although he may be able to hurt you with his arm, where he's probably at his best is when the play breaks down, he's forced to get outside of the pocket, and he's able to use his feet. The kid is a good athlete. He's got a couple 100-yard-plus rushing games, and he's also shown the ability to throw the football at a high enough level to keep West Virginia in a competitive place. To me, what Penn State needs to avoid is the breakdown of the play where Garrett Green's outside of the pocket. He's got all day long to make reads and for somebody to get open, and the way you mitigate that is by getting Penn State's defensive line after that quarterback early.
Yeah, the scrambling is definitely a part of it. The running game is definitely a part of it. How much can that you have a perfect play on defense. You cover the receivers, and how frustrating is that from a mental standpoint of like we got them until we didn't, and can that wear on a defense?
Yeah, I would say the first couple times that happens in the game, it's frustrating and just frustrating because you know that you're probably in a good position to go make the play next time you're in that position. And sometimes in the game of football, a guy just goes makes a play, right? Obviously, what you want to avoid, though, with the guy who will get outside of the pocket, you can't have lapses where defensive ends aren't thinking about contain. They're letting them out too early, and they're putting those corners and those safeties in a tough position. So avoiding those types of mental mistakes with a roster on defense that's so talented is going to be huge to their success all year long.
Penn State runs a very different defense than West Virginia does. There's no sitting back. There's no casual, maybe casual isn't the right word, but there's no off coverage. James Franklin was very clear about that earlier this week. Does Penn State put the screws to this defense and shut down the run and focus on that with numbers in the box? And how much do you trust your secondary? There's no Tig Brown, but there's a lot of talent back there, right?
There's a bunch of talent in Penn State's secondary this year. Obviously, we can talk about Kalen King, and everybody in the country is talking about Kalen King, maybe the best cornerback in college football, but it's not just him. Johnny Dixon is another guy who is going to be an NFL draft pick inevitably, and would be a lot of guys CB number 1. So you got him. You got Daquan Hardy back in his 5th year, who's played snaps all the way since he got onto campus in 2019. You got a lot of depth there, and I look to see their secondary play a lot of press man. Manny Diaz is aggressive by nature. We saw it last year with all these exotic blitzes and pressures he was running. If he has the opportunity to do that because of the way his corners and safeties play, he's going to take that opportunity every time.
So when it comes to the matchup in the secondary, is there any player on the West Virginia team that you think can threaten or make a play against the Nittany Lions and be a guy that you're focusing on when it comes to maybe it's Devin Carter, maybe it's the tight end, number 81. Are there guys there that you think can make some plays and surprise early in the game and keep West Virginia on balance? Because I think that's a big thing for this offense, and tonight is that they've got to find some way to keep balance so that they're not in these 3rd and longs and they're not in obvious passing situations. So Chop Robinson, Adisa Isaac, Denai Dennis Sutton, and the student section will go after those guys.
Yep. Yeah, if I'm West Virginia's offensive coordinator, I'm getting C.J. Donaldson, their running back, who they get back as a sophomore, back involved and getting him involved early. He averaged 6 yards per carry last season as a freshman, which is a very good clip. And another thing I tell you is when you know you got a bunch of guys on the freaks list on Penn State's defense, what we like to do is to get them upfield and then hit them where it hurts. So draws, screens, getting them going and making those elite athletes have to slow down and think and play a slower game than what they'd want to is also big. It's going to be important for Garrett Green to be able to get outside of the pocket and extend plays with his feet. That's really their only chance to win. I think Penn State's secondary has a huge advantage over West Virginia's skill position players, which is why C.J. Donaldson and Garrett Green really are going to have to put this thing on their back.
Yeah, and Garrett Green, he's super interesting. I talked about this on the show, I believe it was yesterday, talking about what he's able to do as a quarterback. You look at some of the advanced metrics, and aggressiveness is built into this defense. So that's where you get into those one-on-one situations with Kalen King and Johnny Dixon on the outside. West Virginia likes to run vertical stuff when they're not beating you to death with screens and with running the football and bringing you up towards the line of scrimmage. The problem is that when you get the aggressiveness on that intermediate level with him, I was looking at some of his numbers from last year, and it's a small sample size, and when you're looking at this stuff, you have to keep it in context. But it was fascinating. When it goes to the ball chucked up down the field, 20-plus yards, he's within rhythm, 2.5 seconds, he throws the football. When he's scrambling around, 3 seconds to throw the football in between 10 and 19 yards, he is a turnover machine.
Yeah.
So if he's extending the play within the structure of the offense, I think he is a danger, as you talked about. If you're flushing him from the pocket and his eyes are wild,
it's a different combo.
You have an opportunity to get interceptions, sacks. You can make this quarterback really uncomfortable, especially if he's trying to find guys into tight windows. Because one of the things I noticed, Aeneas, he is a confident dude. He will put the ball into any window, at any position down the field. So I'm excited. I think you could see Penn State get some interceptions. I could see them giving up a touchdown maybe on a fluke play.
Yep.
Garrett Green's one of those quarterbacks that you roll the dice, and we'll find out what he does. Go ahead.
I'm excited to see a risk taker play against a Penn State defense that I know is turnover hungry. I would not play that game of rolling the dice with Zaki Wheatley roaming around back there looking to get his name back in news articles. It's going to be fun to watch.
It's going to be a ton of fun to watch, and we're going to come and we're going to give our final predictions. We're going to wrap this puppy up with the final segment here on the Blaze Alexander Tailgate 2023. We'll be right back.
About this aggressive quarterback, Garrett Green, who we expect to be the starter. And let's just zoom out again. So remember, 15% of his throws down the field in deep passing situations. 2.5 seconds is roughly how long he holds on the football to throw it deep. When you look at his 10 to 19 yards, that number balloons to 3.04 seconds. By the way, these stats provided by PFF. This makes sense when you watch the film because he is a scrambling quarterback. So, in the rhythm of the offense, he throws it deep. When he's targeting the middle of the field, he's usually scrambling. He's holding onto the football. He's trying to buy time, or he's not throwing with anticipation, but it causes some issues, as you saw there. 17% turnover-worthy plays. Like, he threw the ball into danger almost 20% of his passes. Some other stats, went under pressure, so a lot of the time you're going to see this. He was 3 of 17 for 60 yards. So let's break it down this way. When he's scrambling in structure and extending the play, he is a dangerous threat. When he's ad-libbing, he's dangerous to his own team. So this is going to be something fascinating to watch because I do think he'll extend a couple plays. He'll put some players in conflict, and they'll win. They'll get a couple of maybe chunk plays, maybe 15, 18 yards. But it's also going to come with a lot of problems from him being affected by the pressure and not throwing with accuracy. A couple of things you notice from him in the pocket where you've got to win if you want to be a winning quarterback. He's 5'11". Height affected him. So no pressure coming, but the pocket collapsing. He had a hard time throwing over when he had a tight pocket to work in. Some almost interceptions, some balls that were batted down at the line of scrimmage or that were batted on intermediate coverages. So how he lofts the ball, how he places the ball, I think these are going to be things that Penn State can take advantage of. If you haven't figured it out yet, very little anticipation. So when he's extending the play, sometimes it's because there's pressure. Sometimes it's because he's not doing the thing where there's a zone and you have to fit the ball between 3 players, but there's a window that opens and closes before the receiver is just standing there presenting his numbers. He's got to get better at that timing and trust. He was thrust into the lineup as a starter at the end of the season, so you're going to forgive some of this. These are the things he has to work on when it comes to his ability to throw the football within the structure of the offense and not rely on his legs. Something else James Franklin talked about this week when we talk about the quarterback position. We're going to sit here for a couple seconds and talk about more and different natures of Garrett Green, which is going to be great if he's not the starting quarterback, but he is. He's good. Drew Allar is going to be the starting quarterback. Garrett Green's going to be the starting quarterback. A couple of things that you notice from him. James Franklin talked about easy access throws. They're not a defense that just gives you yardage.
Back to the Penn State Football Tailgate Show, driven by Blaze Alexander Family Dealership. It's time to lock it up. You better lock it up, dude. You lock it up. Here are today's predictions, sponsored by Metzler Forest Products Landscape Center in Reedsville. For all your landscaping and firewood needs. Get your project started by going online at MetzlerForestProducts.com.
Welcome back to the Penn State Tailgate Show. I'm Thomas Reinkard, Penn State Tailgate Show, powered by Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships. This has been a ton of fun. Aeneas and I were just talking about this in the break. We've had a ton of fun. We've dealt through adversity. Everyone has audio. There's a little bit of echo, but guess what? We kept going on, and here we are in the final segment.
Give the people what they want.
That's exactly right. We started here about an hour and a half ago. We didn't have internet, and now we have done a full show. Week 1 is off and popping, and we're here to give you your predictions for tonight's game. So, Aeneas, you and I have been speaking glowingly of the Penn State Nittany Lions all night long, so I am prepared for both of us, big West Virginia here.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, there are a lot of questions about, who Drew Allar is going to be as the starting quarterback. It's a primetime game in Penn State. Can he handle the pressure? And I'm telling you right now, that kid is built for it. Penn State finds a way to win this football game 49-10. It's a bad day to be a West Virginia Mountaineer.
So I've been talking to some of the people from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and from some people that watch the YouTube show, and I just want to say thank you to everybody who stopped by and said hi, everyone who's been here on the stream. This has been kind of a dream for me. Aeneas, I started my career on this radio station about a decade ago, and here we are sitting doing all this stuff. It's super awesome, and I love the interaction. I love that we're able to do all of this stuff. And I got a lot of crap because I gave earlier this week my prediction, and I gave West Virginia 20 points.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I would have gave you a lot of crap if I heard that too.
Yeah, I gave myself a lot of crap after I thought about it. Somebody was like, 20 points, huh? And I thought about it. Everything we just talked about in the last segment of Kalen King, Chop Robinson, Abdul Carter, and I was like, where are they going to get 20 points?
Yeah.
Where they? And here's let me just explain the thing I don't believe in. We talked about Garrett Green. We talked about those extending those plays, and give West Virginia credit. I think this offensive line, something we didn't really dive into a whole lot. This is a good group that is coached very well up front. They are athletic, and they do a great job of being right, but you can beat them. So if they're right a couple times, they perfectly block a run play. You might get an explosive play for a touchdown.
Yep.
You might get a broken play. Penn State plays an aggressive style of defense. It's not as boom or bust or as risky maybe as I thought when Manny Diaz first came in, and I was watching what it did at Miami. He's got the athletes to make it work. So maybe it's not as dangerous as that, but you could have a big play for a touchdown. So you get 2 of those, that's 14. And then garbage time maybe?
So are you sticking with 20 right now? Is that what I'm hearing?
I feel so. This is the thing. I need to be consistent, but no, I want to go 42-13.
Okay.
Literally, when somebody asked me live on air, and I said, I don't know, that doesn't seem. I gave a number. I'm like, I don't know, that doesn't seem right. What's the spread? And they said 20.5. So I added it up. I'm like, yeah, okay, so 42-20. So it's literally just the spread. So knock it down, and it's 10, and then I'm fine with that too. I think that's where we end up. Penn State wins. It's a statement game for the Nittany Lions. If there's one area that you think might challenge them early in the first or second quarter, what are you pointing to as something that you want to see from them overcome adversity, like our audio cable where I'm holding it so that people can hear us on the internet?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I'm looking for in week 1, and the thing that's a challenge not just for Penn State but everybody in college football in week 1 again, are those turnovers and penalties. I want to see a Penn State football team that is able to operate offensively without setbacks, without getting behind the chains because of self-imposed mistakes. If we see a clean product in week 1, that's a really good sign because we all know what the talent in the room is capable of, and it's a good sign that they're where they need to be to start the season.
So we got a couple minutes here. We were so efficient through this show, and we're so good at this, Aeneas.
So good.
We're so good at this. We got a couple minutes here at the end of the show. So let's take a bigger look outside of just Penn State, West Virginia. Let's look at the season. Let's look at how this team can do outside the 1-0 mentality. You are no longer under James Franklin's 1-0 mentality.
I'm done with it.
You can be
free at last. I love that.
You can speculate your heart out with me here.
Yeah.
What do you see from the Nittany Lions in 2020?
As a guy who loves speculations,
yes.
I could see Penn State finishing their season at that 11-1 mark.
Mm-hmm.
I see them dropping either Michigan or Ohio State. I'm not as sold, and that seems like the general public thinks that Michigan at home is the easier game than Ohio State at Ohio State. I'm not sure that I believe that. I think they dropped one of those games. It's tough to go win at Ohio State, but to me, this is the first year that Penn State gets off the bus to play Ohio State, to play Michigan, and they have the talent to match up with them. And at some positions, they have better talent. And that's what I expect to see this year. 11-1 and a run at the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm there with you, and I agree for all the same reasons. And I've talked about this a ton of times when we're analyzing this team. And you mentioned the talent to match up with them. One thing that Penn State has not had, as good as Trace McSorley was, as good as Sean Clifford was, and believe it or not, Penn State fans, he was a pretty good college quarterback. Good is the key word. It's different with Drew Allar. They're shopping in a different cupboard when you have a 5-star quarterback that has the talent that he does. So we're interested to see how quickly he can develop and become that guy. The supporting cast around him is going to be a big part of that, and I think Penn State can also get to that 11-1 mark. Flip a coin for me, which one it is, Michigan, Ohio State, that you lose. I think that's going to be what they do, and we're going to see it in the final year of the 14 playoff. That'll do it for the Blaze Alexander Tailgate Show.
Show driven by Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships. The Tailgate Show is a production of Seven Mountains Media and Blue White Illustrated.